I'm been involved with the new replacement to our local plan, which was last done in 2002. It was a process that's supposed to be much more flexible, much more up to date, and more speedy to deliver. Sadly, here we are 10 years later, and we haven't really taken the first faltering steps. But what that's done, that's left us as a community pretty protected by our own local plan, because any opportunist developer can make a case in court that our plan is of an age that it is no longer fit for purpose. And one of the difficulties that we have two supermarket applications that are probably coming at us. Both of them far bigger than is needed for our town, individually and collectively, absolutely beyond the rule. But what we don't seem to have moved towards yet, and it's something that will be a part of this new planning process, is how this town should be looking for itself to develop in the next 16, 18 years. One of the areas that has been very much underutilised for a long time is what was the railway yard. That is the area from Garrison Lane to Hamilton Road, and from St Andrews up to High Road West. And I was going to ask Steve, who actually lives here, how he considers that land could be best be developed. Normally what would happen in a local plan would be that the whole town would be mapped, and particular types of activity should be occurring in particular bits of the land. Insofar as most of our seafront's supposed to be recreational and tourism, there seems to be some confusion as to where the retail part of our town ends. The wards, I always were led to believe, were actually split on the railway line itself. So where does the retail that comes up to Hamilton Road and obviously to the Orwell roundabout, does that go up? It can't go up all of High Road West, can it? Because you've got residential housing.
That's correct.
Sitting there.
It's a little bit difficult to see here, but certainly there's a significant buffer between the boundaries of the houses here and what is very faint, I appreciate, a yellow line.
Right.
That indicates the town centre boundary.
Does it? Right. So it's the other side of the railway line now?
It does indeed,
oh,
yes.
Right. Okay.
But when they refer to a shopping area at Felixstowe, they talk about a principal shopping area. That's between Orwell Road and Coppled Road. So there's a large amount of the town centre, as such as we would understand it, outside of that principal shopping area.
Really?
Although they class this as town centre.
So they would say it was well adjacent or connected to, would they? That would be the claim, which is why if you were to go to the sort of furthest northern extent and pile it 5 stories high, you would make a case that it was well connected.
Yes,
what they would say?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the concern I have is that that area is a massive area. It's you are aware that the town may be looking to have a minimum of 1,790 dwellings.
Yes.
And I'm really concerned that any opportunity that we would have where you could incorporate retail and housing, every single house you don't build in that setting means that you're going to have to go and take greenfield land because you've got nowhere else to go.
That's correct.
So shouldn't we be looking at, for this, shouldn't we be looking at a much more 21st century use of all of that land, which can address the issues that you have, such as height, overlooking and whatever, but actually makes far better use of this land than it looks as if it will be, because we are aware, aren't we, that with the moving of the central surgery, probable moving of the garage, probable moving of the fire station, that whole corner is to be allocated probably to be retail.
Certainly.
But where's our housing going to go?
Well,
and we need our housing adjacent both to the services and the retail offer. Surely that's what we should be doing.
as you say, and that was identified in a report in 2006 that all of that area could be retail land.
Right.
However, in the David Locke report, he states that it's at that time too viable to actually knock down and redevelop.
Right.
Now, to my way of thinking, the location for the central surgery on Greenfield site by the Grove
It should be.
would make no sense at all when you've got this large area here which would accommodate certainly a
yes.
large amount of car parking
Absolutely.
and access for a bus service as well as the train station itself.
And equally the other services, you already have pharmacy, you already have the other services that those who would be using the surgery would perhaps go on to use, and much more sustainable site. But
I believe so.
we did have this argument, sadly, within the town that of all the sites available, the Grove was probably the least sensible,
Yes.
but it was the only one because apparently there was an inability for the PCT and the doctors to agree
Mhm.
a deal within this, which I found very disturbing.
Well, you could argue that there's a disturbance from the train, for example, but that's once an hour, it's low speed, it's negligible really
No.
for that. And it does beg a belief that if the LDF and other plans have identified we need that housing in Felixstowe.
Well, we do. We're told we're going to have it. It's not a question of whether we would watch. We're being told, aren't we? I mean,
We are.
And as I don't know whether the viewer is aware that, as we speak, a very knowledgeable barrister is considering how sound our core strategy, which is the preamble to the specific, is, and we're hoping it until we get the ruling on whether it's sound at all, then we can't even take the first step. But one of our first steps is to do the Felixstowe plan. But apparently I'm told that could take as long as 2 years. So we would have 2 years of opportunist developers riding rodshot, over our town.
But we still have to decide collectively where the employment is going to come into Felixstowe to warrant the building of the houses, surely.
Well, we're going to wrap up, but I'd love to talk to you about the employment because when the figures, apparently the housing was increased from just over 7,600 to 11,000 on the basis of a report from an Oxford consultant who said that they would be generating 7,000 new jobs in our district in the next 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's retaining the ones we have.
Yeah.
And whatever. And there was a collective gasp that went around the room on just how we will. I mean, I might live long enough to actually see it not delivered. You undoubtedly will. Thank you very much for viewing. We'll try to keep you up to date on all of the machinations of planning. But basically, like I think a guy called Churchill said, democracy requires eternal vigilance, and perhaps in between voting for Strictly Come Dancing and Somebody's Got Talent, just see what's happening to our town and perhaps make a response. Thank you very much. Thanks. Good morning. You find us here today in the delightful hamlet that it now is of Walton, in front of what used to be the big Walton Community Centre. There is a consideration today of a supermarket, and strange, supermarkets are a bit like buses. There are none and then two come along at once, and the one that's being considered here today is C12/2395, submitted on the 22nd of November of 2012, and it's due to be heard and completed by the 21st of February, so there's not a lot of time. The Town Council, who is purely a consultee, will be considering all the ramifications of siting this particular supermarket on the railway approaches. The applicant is a company called Aldbourne Properties. We will tell you where we can what took part in the meeting. Sadly, in this new open democratic society of the 21st century, that which goes on behind the doors are behind closed doors. So all we can do is report what the opinions were of some of those who are able to express an opinion, and sadly that doesn't include the community, because we are voiceless. We can sit and listen but not speak. Thank you very much. We'll update you at a later stage. Hello, just to give you an update on what happened with the railway approach planning application when it was heard by the Felixstowe Town Council Plans Committee. There was a meeting held in the Town Hall on Wednesday the 6th of February where many items were discussed, but the ones of note to this particular item is what did happen. You were aware that the meeting that should have taken place on the 20th of December 2012 as a result of illness was not heard, and it was put to a separate meeting that was actually held at Walton Community Hall this month. It was a very long presentation of application C122395. It involved determining whether the site laid within the town boundary, etc, 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 and it went on for quite some time. But at the end of the meeting, and I was there for the first part, had to leave midway through, like sadly a lot of others, the recommendations made by the Town Council to the Development Control Committee at Woodbridge, who will make the final decision on this application, that there were 5 areas of concern on which they recommended that this particular application be refused. The first was the bulk and massing of the building and the impact that would have on the quality of life to the residents living immediately behind it. And it was particularly worried about a 3-metre wall boundary that would actually give a very unacceptable, supposedly detrimental change to the street scene itself. This further went on to expand onto the damage to the residential amenity of those living down from the fire station all the way through to the traffic lights. There was concern about the level of noise that had been calculated by the applicant. There was also a deal of confusion as to what the logarithmic noise measurement of dBs meant, but I think what it was generally accepted was that whatever happens, it will be pretty noisy for the people living immediately alongside the entry and exit where the deliveries will be taking place. And the final thing that they ended up with, and this was unfortunate, that they were discussing the impact that this would have with regards to the traffic in and around Garrison Lane, because supposedly the delivery traffic would go up towards the railway bridge and turn left and sort of worm its way around the sort of service area of this proposed store and then shoot itself out in front of the Garrison Lane exit looking up High Road West. It was unclear then whether the traffic would be obliged to go up through Garrison Lane towards the allotments, or whether it would then go up through the villages of Walton, Trimley St Mary, Trimley St Martin, and find its way back onto the A14 that way. So there was a deal of concern. There was nothing expressed, sadly, about the impact that such amount of extra traffic may have on Garrison Lane, particularly on the situation we now have, which is continuous traffic coming all the way up from Garrison Lane towards Exeter Road, having particular consequence to housing that's sort of clustered around 110 High Road West, which is where, when we have flooding, the water flows out and into the field. So one would assume if water flows that way, so does diesel particulates and the rest. And there was no call, and I found this surprising, for some air quality monitoring in that particular location. So they were the 4 reasons given by the Plans Committee for rejection, and if you look at them, it is massing, which could be redesigned, which is probable impact, that may or may not be redesignable. The access to and from the site, that is obviously not well planned. One does have concern that a number of these things should be redesigned and resubmitted, so we will keep you informed as and when we know. There was a letter that was actually submitted to the Town Council from the Walton Felixstowe community first, and they were very concerned that at the plans meeting at Walton, the letters that objectors and others had written to the Town Council seemed not to be a part of the briefing or the concerns of the councillors to address these one by one. And I must admit, during the period I was there, it was primarily the technical officer highlighting particular issues, particular councillors picking those up, but during the period I was there, certainly none of the objections of those who lived about it or bothered to write to the town hall seemed to be raised. So whether Walton Felixstowe Community First will continue with this concern, we will wait and see and let you know. Okay, so that's the update on planning number, what did I tell you it was? It was C122395, which actually got to the end of its 13-week period, I believe, on the 9th of February. So the timing for responses ran out some time ago, but as I found in the past, if you have something specific that hasn't been raised by any other person, often the planning officers will use that and give a verbal update to the development control when it comes forward to be heard. One final thing, I checked with the planning office a couple of days ago, and as of then, this particular application wasn't to be heard at the end of this month. So it would appear it may well be into the following month. If you've been watching, thank you. And if you have been watching and you have friends who might be impacted by this, perhaps you can update them. Goodbye from Gainsborough Studio.